So welcome to this afternoon's call. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Tony Restel. I'm one of the founders of topconsultant.com, and before that, for my sins, spent several years in strategy consultancy myself. We've had over 1,000 of you take part in this year's survey on the state of the management consultancy hiring market, so thank you to everyone who's taken part there. And this is a special briefing for those of you who did take part in the survey to give you advanced sight of this year's findings. We're expecting to have the actual report completed within the next couple of weeks, and obviously we'll send you a copy of that in due course. But what we wanted to do is thank those of you who've taken part and give you first sight of those findings. So we're going to spend just the next 20 or 30 minutes or so running through the key findings from this year's report. So just in brief, what I'm going to be sharing with you, the 2013 market update, the level of hiring activity that we're expecting to see this year and trends that are emerging from the report findings. The recruitment channel usage, and in particular what change there's been in the use of social media over the course of the last year. Recruitment channel awards, those of you who have followed this process over a number of years will know that we pick out and identify the job boards, the newspapers, the recruitment agencies, the recruitment consultants who the candidate pool have identified as those they've had the greatest results with. And all of this is based on surveys of both our client base and our candidate readership. So thank you to the over 1,000 of you there who've taken part this year. Let's start off looking at the actual state of the market and the expected hiring trends for the coming year. So during December and January just gone, we surveyed both our client base and our readership to try and get a good feel for what the likely hiring trends would be over the course of the coming year. And over the previous years, this has proven to be a pretty accurate predictor for what's actually gone on to happen. So hopefully some really interesting findings in here. I would say taken across the UK, what we're seeing is that hiring expectations are favourable. They're looking up on last year, but also patchy. So the rebound that we're starting to see is not going to be felt everywhere. It's going to differ by practice area and by type of consulting. When we look at the kind of feedback that we've had from our recruiters and our candidates within these polls, attracting candidates with prior consulting experience seems to be the biggest challenge that firms are facing. There are a lot of people from outside of consulting who'd be quite keen to break into the industry, but actually the candidates that the recruiters are most interested in sourcing are those who come with prior consulting experience. And in parallel with that, overcoming aversion to risk amongst consulting candidates seems to be one of the biggest challenges that recruiters are actually facing. Obviously, all the while that the market is uncertain, people are reluctant to leave a role where they're well regarded and feel quite confident and secure to go and jump ship and join somewhere where they have to prove themselves all over again. So that certainly continues to be an issue that recruiters are facing and one that we've had to deal with now for a good couple of years. There's very much an ongoing pressure from businesses to deliver just-in-time recruiting. That's to say that firms are looking to make their hires as they see shortfalls in their resourcing for forthcoming project wins. So it's very much hiring's happening on a as-needs basis for specific projects that firms can see that they're likely to win. And from the recruiter side, we're hearing both from recruitment agencies and from in-house recruitment teams, HR departments, that a lack of commitment within the businesses to push ahead with hiring decisions or to see them through once they've been initiated continues to be an issue within the consulting industry. So several key things coming out there from your responses. But overall, I think the picture is quite encouraging. We asked all of the recruiters in our survey to look to the year ahead and to state whether they expected hiring levels within the industry to be better or worse than last year. And you can see overall here we've got an 86% balance of people expecting that the coming year will see as many hires or more hires than last year. And in fact, you can see over 2/3 of the respondents there are expecting to make more hires this year than last year. So good news for all the candidates on the call, and also for everyone working within recruitment. There should be more business for us to be working on over the course of the coming year. Now, I talked about the historical context, and let me just bring up a pointer here. What we typically ask is whether people are expecting to make considerably more hires, considerably fewer hires, or somewhere in between. And what you'll see over the years, if we look at the drop here between 2008 2009, recruiters very much foresaw that 2009 was going to be a very difficult year for recruitment, with this big drop-off in the number of people who thought they'd be hiring more staff, and a correspondingly big leap in the number of people who saw their business would be making fewer hires. And as that's rolled on over the years, we've got the date order here, we can see that 2011 was a pretty buoyant year within recruitment. That is what came to pass. Unfortunately, towards the tail end of that year, we hit the Eurozone crisis. But at the beginning of the year, our recruiter contacts were very much predicting that that year would see a big rebound in recruiting. And that is what we saw through to the end of the summer, a really significant upturn compared with the previous year. And so what I think is encouraging here, we obviously had a drop-off last year as the impact of the Eurozone crisis was being felt and being feared. But we've had a rebound here, and across the industry, people are expecting there to be a better balance of recruiting this coming year. So we're not talking about a spectacular recovery here in recruiting, but we should see it building on what we saw last year. And in terms of the type of hiring that we're expecting to see, there's a number of things we can pick out. Firstly, amongst the recruiters, the expectation is that it'll be the financial services sector, the energy and utilities sector, and all areas of IT and technology sectors that will see the greatest demand for hires this coming year. Interestingly, there's still no real sign of a significant rebound in public sector hiring, be that within public sector, central government, education, the whole spectrum. In terms of the types of consulting where we're likely to see the strongest hiring, your collective view is that it's going to be technology, e-business, social media consulting, and also the project program management area, which are going to see the strongest growth in hiring, and obviously therefore correspondingly the greatest potential difficulties in making hires. But very interesting, I think, is that now strategy consulting, which is usually perceived to have a rebound when the market picks up and when the economy gathers steam and momentum, hiring expectations within that area have now declined for two consecutive years. So there do seem to be things underway within strategy that are undermining its ability to pick itself up and do well in the current market. So that's going to be an interesting trend to watch over the course of this year. Now, in terms of who recruiters would like to be hiring over the course of the next year, it still very much remains the case that it's experienced hires from other consulting firms that are the primary audience that they're targeting. And this is a time trend over the last 4 years. You can see the importance there has grown bit by year on year. And certainly in your individual feedback within the survey forms, this was reiterated time and time again, that finding staff who have prior consulting experience is really your pain point at the moment. Hiring experienced hires in from industry is declining, and similarly from the city, a modest decline as well. But we are seeing a bit of an uptick in terms of your interest in hiring university leavers and finalists, and to a lesser degree graduating MBAs. So interesting trends there, but I think it's really those who have prior consulting experience who are going to continue to be in the greatest demand over the course of the next year. So that's some of the key findings from our recruiter survey respondents in terms of where they see the market going this year. And overall, as I say, an upbeat picture, but not one that we should get carried away with. Turning our attentions now to our candidate respondents and how they have fed back to us that they've been behaving in their last job hunt. That's what we're going to be looking at now and seeing which different channels they've been using, how much they've been turning to social media and so on. Well, the key findings here, and very interestingly and contrary to media hype, it continues to be the case that only a minority of candidates are actually using social media to apply for jobs. And I'll make the distinction here between landing a new job through social media and actually using social media to apply for jobs, because there's quite a distinction there. We're going to see that almost all consultants have a profile on LinkedIn and characterize themselves as active users of the site, meaning they regularly log in, they regularly use the site. The vast majority are using social media to expand their professional network and to engage in activities that further their career and help them to stay in contact with friends and former colleagues. But only a minority have applied to any jobs via that channel or indeed approached recruiters directly. So quite an interesting contrast to the types of messages being put out there in the media. And we ask candidates also to look at what they would intend to do in their next job hunt. So based on their experiences this time round, what would they do differently next time? And it still remains the case that social media is not high on their agenda. So I think the key message coming out of this is that social media as a recruiting channel is most potent where clients are actually proactively hunting for the candidates that they would like to bring on board, drawing up shortlists via social media and directly approaching those candidates via social media, rather than relying on those places as alternative advertising boards. So let's look at the different application channels and how they've been used in the last job hunt. And what we see here is what percentage of candidates submitted some applications via each of the different channels identified. So you can see that, and this is over the last 3 years, with the right-hand bar being the most recent year, use of personal contacts, referrals, their own network has been pretty consistently more or less candidates' top choice in terms of the channel that they choose to use. With recruitment agencies having had a bit of a lull a few years back, very much having picked themselves up as an industry and one of candidates' preferred means as well. Internet job boards remain pretty consistent, around 2/3 of applicants using those channels to apply for jobs. But I think the really interesting thing, in light of all the media hype and speculation, is that the proportion that have actually made any applications via any social media site, we're still only talking about just over 1/3 of candidates have submitted any applications that way at all. So, and this is obviously within the management consultancy space, but that's the one that interests us on this call. Correspondingly, I think corporate sites have dropped off here, and I could certainly see that candidates perceive that they're now able to go direct to corporates through social media, and so the corporate website being the most obvious channel to suffer from the rise of social media, I think is is quite interesting. And newspaper adverts, I mean, it won't be a surprise to anyone that they've more or less disappeared off the radar. There's a very small rump of candidates now who are still applying via that route. So we were looking there at who had used which of those different channels, and on the next chart here I wanted to share with you what proportion of candidates' applications were actually generated via each of those channels. So we can see here internet job boards remain the single biggest source of applications that candidates are making, although that has dropped off slightly over the last couple of years. Recruitment agencies have held pretty steady in second place, with corporate sites quite a long way off in third. Interestingly here, although personal contacts and referrals and using your network is candidates' preferred means of searching for work, it's not how the majority of applications are made, and I guess that in part is a function of how broad people's networks are and how many companies they are actually able to network themselves into. Social media sites, just over 10% of applications generated that way. So you're looking here at a share of applications that's only a third of what job boards are generating. So I would just caution anyone who's being swayed too much by the argument that LinkedIn and Facebook and the like are destroying the job board industry, because I don't see that from our end, and I don't believe that to be the case. I think where it is empowering recruiters is, as I say, to actually effectively headhunt candidates and draw up a short list of target candidates and then directly approach those candidates without perhaps ever having advertised a role at all. And last but not least, newspaper adverts here, and we saw on the previous chart very few candidates using those now, but those that are still submitting a decent volume of applications via that route. This, I think, is a very interesting chart for those of you trying to figure out your social media strategy for the coming year, because what we've asked consultants to do is to identify on which social media platforms they are active contributors or users, and we define that as meaning that they go into their account and they check their messages or post updates or whatever on at least a weekly basis. And what we can see here, LinkedIn had reached 90% saturation of the market last year. Slight drop this year. That may or may not be significant. But interestingly, Twitter here is, and I'm a great proponent of Twitter. I love the platform myself, but it's quite clear that the majority of the consulting population aren't regular users of that platform. So there's a small minority of the candidate pool that you can reach via that channel, and that could be very useful to your business. But it's certainly not got the mass reach of some of the other channels. Google Plus, again, there's been a lot written about that, and it's been making great strides in lots of sectors over the course of the last year or so. But within consulting, it seems to still be very much a minority platform. So that's the platforms that consultants are using, and what are they using those platforms for? We asked consultants to identify, what are the main things that they have been doing on the social media platforms that they're a member of. And you can see that things like expanding professional network, maintaining contact with colleagues, staying in contact with friends and family, these are the things that they view as their main activities on the site. And similar to one of the previous charts, it's only around a third of candidates that are using social media to actually apply, find and apply for job openings, and an even smaller number who are directly approaching recruiters in their network via these social media channels. So I think the momentum and the onus is very much on recruiters and on corporate employers to be proactively using these channels to approach candidates rather than sitting back advertising and waiting for the candidates to come to them. And I said we also, that's obviously past behaviour, but we ask candidates, are they planning on doing anything differently in their next job search based on their experiences? What would they be inclined to use next time they're job hunting? And you can see here it's very much the case that personal contacts, referrals, recruitment agencies and job boards are up there as the main things that candidates are intending to use, with corporate websites and social media sites a fair way back, and newspaper adverts really hardly factoring in there at all. But I think we would all recognise within the industry that candidates do not love corporate careers sites. They don't like the lengthy application processes they have to go through. They don't like the fact they don't get to talk to anyone. They don't like the fact that they very often don't get a response back once they've applied. So the fact that candidates are actually saying social media sites are going to be less attractive to them to use even than corporate websites, for me, was a real surprise. And those of you that know me will know I split my time between top consultant and between advising on using social media as part of a job search or recruiting strategy. So I'm very much a proponent of how that can be used, but I think within consulting here we have to look at this very carefully and say it's not something that our candidate pool are specifically prioritising. So that brings us to the end of looking at candidates and how they've behaved and gone about conducting their last job search, and brings us on to the section where we ask candidates to feed back to us which of the resources and companies they've used they've had the best results with, which newspapers and so on they use, which recruitment suppliers they've been happiest with. So let me very briefly run you through those findings as well. Starting off with job boards, and those of you who've been on this call before will recall we show you what percentage of candidates are using each of the different job boards out there, and then what percentage are rating that job board as what they consider to be the best place for finding consulting jobs. And this picture hasn't changed too much from last year, really. You have Top Consultant and, to a degree, LinkedIn being used by a large percentage of that 1,000 response base we had back, and those two being rated as the standout sites for finding consulting jobs. And then the other sites that you may be using yourselves have a much lower proportion of candidates using the site, and hardly anyone rating them as being the best place to find a consulting job. So it does very much remain the case that there's that sort of gap between the two sites here and then the other big names, and then there's a whole host. We covered about 15 or 20 different job boards within this analysis, and the others really didn't feature here at all. So when you're thinking about what your job board presence should be over the course of the coming year, these are the types of sites you should be looking at. And certainly down here, for example, JobServe on the IT front, if you've got very IT-focused hiring needs, I'm not saying you shouldn't consider that type of board at all. Similarly, Exec Appointments with its link now with the FT, if you've got financial services, banking requirements, could be somewhere for you to look and test out as well. But for the bulk of your needs, it's going to be the sites up here that are of greatest interest. We also ask our consulting candidates to identify which newspapers they regularly read, just for those clients who are thinking about still running newspaper advertisements. And it's interesting this year that The Economist has actually leapfrogged the Times and the Financial Times to become the publication that candidates are most likely to be reading. So an interesting change there, possibly because more consultants are now reading the Times online. I can't say that definitively. I don't have any data to support that, but perhaps that's one explanation. And then we come on to our equivalent of the Oscars, which is to praise and acknowledge those recruitment firms and those individual recruiters who our candidates have singled out as being the companies and the individuals that they've had the best experience of working with over the course of their last job change. And really have to take my hat off here to BLT, to Beaumont Leslie Thomas, who've pulled out of the bag being in top spot for the 5th consecutive year here. So quite outstanding performance from them. And then a number of other firms there who've also had very stellar, strong feedback from consultants, and also very few criticisms. So these rankings are based on both the number of candidates who are raving about a recruitment firm, but also deducting all of the negative feedback that candidates have given about specific firms. So really, to appear on this list, a firm has to be generating a lot of praise and not a lot of criticism from candidates. So congratulations to those firms there. You will be getting award certificates through in the post from us over the course of the next week or so. And again, special congratulations to Beaumont Leslie Thomas. And alongside asking in which firms candidates have had the best experiences with, we do also ask which individual recruiters candidates have had good experiences of working with, and we have some individuals here who've been singled out for praise by candidates. So if you're looking to work with a recruiter, maybe Becca Nelson, Chris Sale, Craig Milbourne, Darren Head, David Lancefield, Don Leslie, Luke Mulholland, Paul Brown, Rakesh Pabby, Ruth Radnam-Skibbin or Sasha Kemp could be people you might turn to over the course of this coming year. So congratulations to all of you as well, and likewise award certificates on their way to you. And I'll just reiterate here, to have 1,000 candidates provide their feedback about firms and recruiters, it's a really glowing endorsement that these firms and these individuals have been singled out in this way. So that brings us to the end of the findings from this year's report. There will be more detail in the full report, but we were conscious that we wanted to get the main findings to you as quickly as possible, and with the best will in the world, it will take us another couple of weeks to finish compiling the report and getting that PDF out to you. So I wanted to share these findings with you now. And just one last thing, we did have within the recruiters survey a request for your feedback about how the site could be improved. Quite conscious that we hadn't done a great deal on that front over the last years. And just to give you a quick advanced preview, if you like, a screenshot here of how the site's going to be looking over the course of, within the next couple of months. We're planning on launching this look in Q2, and we were asked to focus on making it look more modern, improving the layout and the menu structure, and incorporating a lot more social sharing options so that people could easily share the job content and the news content on places like LinkedIn and Facebook and so on. And so all of that's been incorporated here, and you should see that being rolled out by us, as I say, in Q2. So thank you all for your suggestions, and thank you all for joining us on this call. I'll make sure to get a copy of these findings out to you later today, hopefully together with a recording of this session if everything's worked fine, and then a copy of the report will wing its way to you later in March when we finish that. Thank you all for your time.